Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Thanks again, folks, for joining us here at the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and boy, I'll tell you, we got the holidays going to be coming up here shortly, and we're going to be out of here for about 3 weeks or so, and probably won't be back until about January, the late January, about 24th or something like that. But anyway, we're going to throw some repeats on that I think will be quite interesting to keep us going, but we want to make sure right up front that we have enough time right now to say happy holidays to you and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's and all that good stuff. Because, you know, after I get started, especially with these two guys here with me right now, I won't have the time to do nothing. but anyway, again, wish you happy holidays. The whole 9 yards has been great. Fantastic year, and we're going to have some very interesting years. Interesting. The next year is going to be awesome. 2018 is going to be awesome. We're going to be right in the midst of a campaign. It's going to be huge. We got some all kinds of things. The whole country is kind of changing, if you will.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to be part of it. And I just happen to have two guys here that's going to be part of that. I've got one guy that I met years back. He was a lobbyist down in Salem. Another guy, good buddy of mine named Ted Hughes. I had dinner with him the other night or so. And I'm talking about Jim Whittenburg. Jim, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing
You're looking good.
I'm doing just fine.
You're looking younger than the last time I saw you.
Well, I'm going the other way now.
You're going the other way?
I'll get to the top, and I want to go back down.
Well, we're going to get you back in there because I know you're an avid reader, and I know you like politics, and you know, we're going to maybe do something next year and have you come on in here and you know, just talk a little bit about this stuff. But we're going to need you to get this stuff cleaned up a bit.
I've been practicing 50 years.
50 years. Yeah. 50 years. You see what I'm saying? He needs about another 5, you know. But anyway,
I'll be ready then.
You'll be ready then. But we'll hit it right now, okay? But we got Jim here on, and we're going to spend a little time with him, just kind of talk a little politics and the changeover aspect of it. And politics always involves a quote politician or a person maybe running for office. I like the idea of the person running for office that hasn't been there yet, to kind of get a kind of the transition deal, and then Jim will be here, and we'll be able to talk with this person. Like I just happened to have Art Robinson. Art's been on the show before, and he's run before. He's, as far as I'm concerned, he actually won, but he won in the primary, and he won in the general. So he had two terms during that year that he ran, that time that he ran. See,
he win the general.
And then the general. What am I thinking about? I'm thinking about the primary.
We keep winning the primary.
You keep winning the primary, right?
Mr. DeFazio.
Right. But even in the general, you run for a certain period of time, and then whoever wins, then they go on and spend their time. But the fact of the matter is, I think that he'd do well getting into the long-term piece aspect of it. But he's running against DeFazio, and DeFazio's been in that seat for quite some time. And as you know, the Oregon Voters Digest, again, we're going south this time. We're going south of Oregon Voters Digest. We're trying to figure out what's going on in that part of the world. And Art really just sort of is very, very much involved in that part of the world. And we thought we'd have him on today to end the year, if you will. And again, like I said, we're going to have him here, and so he's going to talk a little bit to us about his campaign. But most important, there was this other thing that he brought to the table, and it is some health issues. I mean, I'm somewhat partial to the health issues, especially these young guys that I'm sitting up here now with Jim and even Art. So we're gonna talk to him about that piece. But he's running for office. He's a good guy. He's a good person. And we've always tried to get DeFazio to come on and maybe debate with him, or just, hey, come on and let the people know what you're doing for the state of Oregon. That's what it's all about. Got me? So with that, why don't we just open up, and why don't we do this first? Why don't we just say, so Art will have an idea of some of your background and aspect of it, Jim. Why don't you just share a little bit, some tidbits about your time when you're lobbying, if you will, and what do you think about the crop that we have today, the folks who are running, the folks who are in?
I'm somewhat disappointed right now with the legislature. I've expected more out of them, I guess. I thought they'd get better, but they're really not right now. And what I'm worried about is that we keep having budget shortfalls. We never seem to have enough money for the people in Salem, and that's a problem, because people like my father and my grandmother, you know, were having trouble clear back in the 1960s to late 60s paying their property taxes. So then I thought, well, if we change the property tax so they can't make it so high, will be okay. And maybe to even think about having a sales tax here in the state. I know Governor McCall thought about it, and Governor Barbara Roberts thought about it, and I think there's got to be a way that we don't have a surprise every year just before the legislature starts saying we're short on money again. You know, my health care goes on all year long, every year. It doesn't just start at a certain point, and they say, well, we don't have enough money to cover. I've been in the risk pool in the state. I've had insurance, and then there's been years I haven't had insurance here. Fortunately, I'm so old now, I get Medicare at this point, and they pay I can buy the extra insurance on top of it, and I'm covered, fully covered. But really, it's been a hard thing for me, because I don't like to work in a pharmacy all the time. I can sell drugs, and anyone can do that. That's not a terrible job. You know, answering the questions around it is hard. When I got to where my brother has misfortune, gave him AIDS, and he had he retired from Safeway after many years as an executive with them. Suddenly, I didn't know those drugs anymore. There were new drugs, and I didn't know. And I didn't want to be a person who was dispensing drugs he didn't know about. I thought that was disingenuous. And so I told him that I was going to retire a little bit early and get out of and let some young guys come in that knew what these drugs were about and what they were supposed to do and could answer the questions that people had. I was working with taking care of people's lives at the end of life, and we had to worry about death with dignity, and I thought that maybe we could help people through the end of life process, but then all of a sudden it was made to be a dirty thing, and I couldn't understand that, because I had a grandfather, then I had another grandfather die of cancer, I had a mother die of cancer, and I had finally my stepfather died of cancer. So I had 4 people in my life die. I would have loved to let them still have all their hair out and filled full of pain medication. And when my mother died, she didn't have the hair on her head, and she wore a bandana all the time. I thought, how awful, how sickening to do that to her, when she really would have just liked to die like my father did. He died of a painless death because he let go early. Secondly, you know, I'm really upset with the state of affairs in Portland. You know, I worked 5 months for Ted Wheeler to be mayor of this town, and I took my walker out and got in the bus, and I walked the last 5 blocks to his office, and through 2 flights of stairs to the 3rd floor, and in an elevator. I'm sorry, and then he told me all these things that he was going to do, and I listened to him. I said, "Hey, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful. You sure you can do this?" Well, it's a year now since they started with this, dealing with the homeless, which he told us he could do within a year. And I don't see that he's done that terribly much on the schedule he set. You know, in my street, there's 2 brand new apartment buildings going up, giant apartment buildings. Then on the next street over, Vancouver, there's another big apartment building. And up further north of me and up near Alberta and stuff, I don't even recognize the place. I used to be there quite often with my friends. I don't know what they've done, but nobody can afford them that I know. Everybody, it's above what their Social Security is to get in the apartment, and then they've got a deposit on top of that. You know, these apartments, I'm afraid, are being built for wealthy people and middle class people, and when they're done, we're going to find out that none of the people who are homeless in this town could afford to get into them, and that's wrong. That is really wrong. I was telling them, I appeared before City Council a while back, and I told them, you know, if I had $120,000 a year job, and I could sit up and look down at people in the front of the room. I'd get up every morning and I'd kiss the ground and thank God for giving me this wonderful job. And yet they don't seem like that they appreciate what they've been given, the power that they've been given. And I look next door to the City Hall, I see a $200 million building renovation. $200 million. I can't even imagine how much that is. And they got the whole building closed off now and surrounded by fencing. And it's going to be 2 years. They're going to be paying for
that kind of money, yeah.
those people to be in. It's like money is in a candy store.
Did he share this with you when he basically recruited you to come and work on his campaign?
I told Ted Wheeler that I thought that was too much money, and I expressed that. He said he could take care of that. He could build a building for half of that. He could build a building for half of that.
Now, was this before he ran?
No, it was
during the time he was running.
Yeah, during the campaign for him. He told me that I was right and that he could build a building for half that, and then they could put the people back in it after he built that building. He could build it in less than a year. Now, this is going to take 2 years. It's going to take $200 million. And my friend Nick Fish down there told me that he voted for it finally, and he just wanted to get rid of it. He dealt with it long enough.
Wow.
And I thought, that is no reason to do this. I mean, I know Nick is inundated with stuff, and he has an idea on, but you can't spend money just to get it out of your hair.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's a lot of money, and Nick knows I'm against this, and I told him then, and I tell him today. But the people aren't being honest up there. They're just not. I think Chloe Daly has got herself in a mess right now because she's told the media all over that she doesn't have time to do this, and she's not going to interview with them, and she thinks that somehow she's going to beat the Oregonian and Willamette Week, and she's not going to.
No, she's not going to be able to do that.
I'm sorry to say it. Her aide knows this too. I've talked. I shouldn't say this.
Really, Austin? Is it Austin?
Oh, it's
one of the other guys. I don't know if Austin is still working for him.
That's not his name. It's
okay.
I'll think of a second.
Anyway,
but he's telling me, and just shook his head, that he's had the same problem. When people think they're better than somebody else, after this short time, they don't realize they're heading for a real comeuppance at a certain point. And I felt it. I got them before when I was younger, and I'll get them again if I get back into politics. But I don't want to alienate everybody. It's not stupid to do that.
What about Dan? Now Dan is getting out.
Dan Saltzman?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan's tired. He's been there 18 years now, and that's long enough. He wants to get down to the coast and get in his beach cabin and just have a good time in the last few years.
Take it easy.
Yeah. He doesn't want a big primary fight against Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith. They'll eat him up at this point. They're better speakers than he is. So he was smart to get out. He's got enough money. I mean, he's got a wealthy family.
Oh yeah.
So
they were in the real estate.
I'm sorry to see him go because I liked him, but I don't. I like his children's programs. I told him that. He really took care of kids in this town. But he's run his course. Now he doesn't have any new ideas.
Now we got 2 seats open. We got Dan Salzman and we got Nick Fish. What about him?
Well, I don't know.
Let's talk about the crops that's running.
I don't know that Nick's going to be out of his seat. I know he's.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way.
He's sick.
He's running. He's running very.
Yeah, he's running hard.
Yeah, he's running. He got 1 seat open.
I think he could get through this term. I don't know whether he can negotiate 4 more years. I just don't know that. I mean, I couldn't last 4 more years.
That's a toughie.
Yeah, that would be.
That's a toughie. It's grueling right now.
Yeah.
With all the activism and all that other good stuff.
Sure. We need some people that are middle-aged
Yeah.
and up in office there because they've been there long enough to see a few things happen, and they've had time to form a few opinions, and now they're ready to serve a few years and help their community. And I met a little girl the other day that's running for that seat, but she's too young. She doesn't know what she needs to do, and I like her, and I think she's an environmentalist, and she might be ready in 4 years.
And that's an issue. That's a major issue, because a lot of times folks are just running and have no idea what the job is.
She's smart. She's smart, and I would like to see her take a shot, but I don't think she'll win this time, but she can be ready in 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
What about some of the other candidates that are running?
Oh, I don't know.
You got Joanne. You got Joanne. You got Loretta.
I support Joanne Hart.
Okay, Joanne. Okay, all right.
She used to be Joanne Bowman.
Joanne Bowman.
I just saw that last night.
She's working. She works hard.
I'd forgotten that. So she got married again.
She got married again. I think
that's what I didn't know.
She's married again.
I knew I liked her.
And whatever. Then you got Loretta.
I think Loretta's a good person, but I'd have to choose between the two people, and I gave money to Hardesty.
Okay. Anybody else in that race that you think might be competitive?
No, not right now.
Okay, the other two.
The other gal's got a traffic violation against her.
And she was working for Ted too at one time. She was working for Ted Willis.
She's in a tough position. I've met her. I've interviewed with her. I've been in her office. I like her, but just because you're Hispanic doesn't mean you should be qualified to run for office. Both Loretta and Joanne have worked for years.
They've been in the business.
And that's who I would be supporting. Finally, I don't know who else is up there.
Well, you got Nick, who's going to be running. And you got a couple of people. I think Fred Stewart said he was thinking about running, and then you got who was the other guy? He's an architect and building and stuff. You know what I'm talking about? You see him on. You see him posted.
Dixon?
No,
that's not right.
No, but
I don't know the other.
But anyway, I mean, I've been trying to get him to come on, but it's like anything else.
Well,
so
it's hard.
These guys don't want to come and share, whatever.
Well, right. I'd like to see the governor's races one.
That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I supported for the first time in 50 years. I supported Dennis Richardson for Secretary of State. I voted for him, and he kept after me and kept after me and kept after me. And finally, I said, you've asked me for your vote, for my vote, and the other guy hasn't. And that's the difference in whether I'd vote for the Democrat or the Republican. And now that with Newt Bueller running as a Republican, as a doctor, there's two pretty smart people, but I think that Bueller would be a better leader right now. I think
as opposed to Kay?
Yeah. Okay. I know Kate. She was my state senator and my state representative.
Well, she lives in the area too, in the Portland area.
I like her. I like her a lot, but so far she hasn't been a replacement for Kitzhaber. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I like John Kitzhaber. I'd vote for him every time he ever ran. I'd work for him every time, and I did it twice. In 2010 and 2014, I worked in both his campaigns, and I just think that he has a presence about him, that he's a leader, and I don't see this as much in Cade as I do. I look at Bueller as being a fellow has great potential to be a leader in the state. If he just gets a little better on his issues right now, he needs to care a little bit more about the down and out, because he doesn't know them yet.
Yeah.
I'm
social.
You know where I'm living.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, know.
I'm living.
Yeah, I know.
I'm living. I wanted to see what it was like to live there.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I got a wealthy family. They're all.
Yeah.
They've all got more money than they can spend.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, one brother's here in town. He's dying. And the other brother's up in Montana, and he has 3 houses. He doesn't know which one to live in now. He's confused.
You can't take it with you, right?
Yeah. So you can't put it in your...
No,
you can't put it in your coffin. It won't fit in there.
No, you can't. You can't.
But I really love him.
You made that point about Bueller, and I was thinking about the area, and then that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate Art here, is that they look at the Portland metropolitan area and they say, well, don't worry about it. Well, hey, if you don't pick up a sizable number of votes in this area,
Yeah.
you're not going to have it.
It's going to be hard.
It's a toughie. And no, people tend to want to stay away from this area. What do you think? Why is that so?
Statewide candidates, you mean?
Yeah, as far as the metropolitan Portland.
Well, I think
why is it there's a void?
I always loved campaigning here. I've campaigned door to door. And I've worked for the Democrats to collect signatures for the health care in here, and I worked for MACG, Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good. And in fact, I had a call from the fellow from Cincinnati Concerned, Ed Blackburn.
Oh yeah,
He called me the day before yesterday.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of things for this city, and yet he almost died. He came close to dying. And I thought, by golly, he's got time to call me when he's trying to keep himself. But I used to work with him. I respected him a great deal because he took care of people. He saw an old drunk across the room from him, and he was concerned about him. You know, and I thought that's admirable to do that. Most people don't. They look at, I don't want to talk to that person. You know, I tried it on the bus the other day, just talking to people. You know, they're really interesting people, some of the down and outers that we
I remember that.
You know, all my friends are wealthy. I don't know any people that.
Well, Jim, another piece I was going to ask you about real quick, what about the little activism, the two young groups here? You got was it you got the young kid named Joy something or other, and then you got the African American young man. I'm talking about the two groups that are butting heads downtown City Hall. What do you think about that? What's your feel?
Well, I went to that protest last week down there, and I saw the police on one end of the block and the activists against the immigrants on the other side. And I happened to listen to it for a while, and then I walked up and I gave them some signs that they would understand without having to ask anybody, because anyone's against immigrants. You know, my nieces are all Indonesian, and my uncle's wife was Japanese, and I don't think that I can tell, looking at somebody's eyes, tell what they are just because of the color of their skin, and I don't believe that we can make those judgments. It's just too hard now. There's good Hispanics and there's bad Hispanics. We know that. There's good whites and there's bad whites. I mean, most of the killings are done by white people, not Hispanics or blacks. And we should think about that when we start going after these people. I mean, I got some black people that I don't like, but I got some white people I don't like either. You know, and because they're just not good people right now. Maybe they will be later on, but right now they've got problems. They're addicted to drugs or alcohol or something. I just don't think that we need to label people. There's the word. We shouldn't be labeling somebody as a bad person or a good person or a literate person we don't have that capacity. I don't. I'm a licensed pharmacist for 40 years.
But then the other thing comes up to mind is the sanctuary city piece. What do you think about that? We're supposed to have been the birthing, if you will, of the whole issue.
I'm conflicted there. That we had I used to associate with the Peace House over here on 18th and Tillamook, and we had a Hispanic person there for a while, staying there out of the Augustana Church, and suddenly he went out one day and got himself arrested. And he was a nice guy. We all liked him and stuff, but it's hard to help somebody when they won't help themselves. We told him we didn't think he should go out of the place because he would be subject to arrest, and he did it anyway. Now, I mean, we try to help, and we can't seem to do enough for them. We go to the Augustana Church over here, Lutheran Church. They hide people in their basement for sanctuary, but I'm uncomfortable with that, I guess, because I think that we shouldn't subject the whole church to one way of thinking, and that's what's happening now. And I've felt that way for quite a while. So I'm hard to accept the full ramifications of anyone that is Hispanic or out of this area who commits a real crime and then wants to live in a sanctuary city. Like, I just think that there are people selling drugs, and that's hard for me. That's a very hard one.
What about illegal immigration? What is that? Is this you're talking about that same arena?
That's tough too. But I think that we took the land, we took California and New Mexico and Arizona from the Mexican people and I can't get over. We have missions labeled down in California, the San Rafael and the state, and Rio, the Rio Drive down there that they have. That was Mexico at one time, in south of San Francisco, and it's hard to tell them when they're having a tough time making a living in Mexico that they can't come back and try it here. We're all immigrants. All of us are immigrants. All of us sitting here came from someplace else, and we're going to have to find some way that works for us. And maybe not tomorrow or the next day, but we're going to have to someday make a decision about whether we approve of immigration or not. Mm-hmm. And as President Trump has told us he doesn't approve of it, and I'm thinking, didn't you come from Europe somewhere to Mr. Trump? And he doesn't want to answer that.
Okay. Well, hey, you've got the review there. We got the review.
Yeah.
We're going to take a short break, and we're going to get back and give Art the opportunity to chat, and then we're going to chat from Art. Is that fair? Okay, good. We'll take a break. We'll be right back, folks.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Okay, look like we're back again, and I guess you got the overview, if you will, of the metropolitan era, if you will, here for 2017, and you got a good vintage group, vintage view, if you will, of what Jim was talking about, of the area, metropolitan Portland, the like, and throughout the state for that matter. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to go south with the Voters Digest, and we're going to bring Art Robinson in. He's from that particular area. He happens to be running for Congress, District number 4, against Peter DeFazio. He's done it several times. In most cases, most incumbents are pretty formidable anyway. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty tough deal. But he stayed with it, and I'm really liking the fact that he stayed with it. And so anyway, we're going to give him the opportunity to chat with us. And what we'll do right off the bat, Art, it's your day. Talk to us.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, first off, let's just briefly share with them a little bit about your background and what you're doing.
Well, I'm a scientist.
Right,
and
right.
I was educated at Caltech and UC San Diego, and I spent about half of my time, the last 50 years, working on fundamental science, biochemistry, nuclear physics. The other half working on things that might improve the quality and quantity of human life. And worked with Linus Pauling for 15 years until we had an argument, but that was pretty good. And studied nutrition and preventive medicine, and what I'm especially interested in today is our work on diagnostic medicine.
Okay. Okay. Speak just a little louder.
And
okay.
We have a medical system today where you have to get very ill and
Right.
then you seek help, and it's pretty expensive. It's important, of course, that the help is there, but technology is beginning to change that. We had an idea in 1968. Linus and I worked on it for 10 years, and then we've continued. And that is to find out, you measure health quantitatively. If you can't, as a scientist, can't get quantitative data, it's hard to take action. So in our work, when we started this in 68, it was because we were interested in nutrition, and we wanted to do graphs of health versus the amount of a nutrient. If it's a vitamin, there's no health without it, you're dead.
Okay.
And as you take more and more, your health increases, then it reaches a maximum that decreases because you're taking too much. So you like to be able to draw the graph for people and tell them what to eat. But we couldn't, because we had nothing to put on the axis. We couldn't measure health quantitatively. So this was the idea we had. And it was to measure a large number of the chemicals produced by your body in normal metabolism, and to look for statistical patterns that related to your health. In those days, we could do about 150 substances in 4 hours, but we could test the hypothesis. And the hypothesis was right, but technologically it wasn't ready yet because it would have been too expensive to get the information. But now, we've been working on it now again for about 8 years with a new technology. We've added a lot to that technology. The bottom line is we can now measure 4,000 substances in a urine sample in 2 minutes. And 1,000 of those are coming from your metabolism. So we have very good measurement technique. This could be offered to people for $5. And but the other thing we've done is to ask Oregonians to cooperate to provide us with urine samples. And we're banking them. We have 5,000 Oregonians sending us periodic urine samples because we want to be able to see diseases before the people have symptoms. We want to be able to intervene earlier. But you can't study that unless you have samples before they knew they were sick. So we have the sample bank, and the people send samples which are stored cryogenically at very low temperatures so that they don't change. And then when a group of them gets the same ailment later, we can look to see if we could have seen it coming and what the pattern was. So we recently published our first results from this. We measured samples from the urine bank in people that had heart attacks and heart disease, had heart attacks, and they didn't know they had heart disease at the time that they gave the sample. And women who had breast cancer later but did not know that they were going to have breast cancer when they gave the sample. And we showed that we could have predicted that would happen because by studying the patterns in their urine, we could see with 90% reliability that an individual was going to have a heart attack soon. And we could see with a little lesser probability, but the thing's still improving, that the person was contracting breast cancer, especially with degenerative diseases which develop for a long time before they give you symptoms. The idea is to measure the disease quantitatively so you can fight the probability of getting the disease rather than waiting until you have it, or have it to the point that you're suffering.
It would have helped me. I had 3 hearts.
And we also did it for prostate cancer. This is the first time this has been done.
Wow.
But we made innovations in the technology that made the rapid measurement of large numbers of substances possible. We're building on technology that's been developing for all kinds of purposes. And then we built some of the mathematics required. But the most important thing was the sample bank. It sounds mundane, get a bunch of people to give you urine periodically, but that's essential, because otherwise you can't see whether you could see these things before. Now, it's an interesting political problem, because I'm running for office, and of course Peter DeFazio has been telling everybody that I'm completely crazy because I like to collect urine samples from people. And that became quite an issue in the campaign, because you're in a patriotic parade, you know, these parades we have during the summer, and you have DeFazio's people shouting from you, say, "Hey, Art, I'll give you some of my pee." Right?
Yeah.
And the idea is Art Robinson's crazy, because, but I'm sorry, I've been interested in this for 50 years, not because it's any fun. Biochemistry is fun. You're learning new things about how the world works. It's no fun to measure, to spend your time collecting and measuring urine, but we spend half of our time that way for humanitarian purposes, because we want to help people. And this was a thing we hit upon that can help people. And so I believe that we're nonprofit. We don't take government money, but we live on private donations and foundations. And I believe that within a few years, these things will be industrialized. The industrialists will pick up the information, start to deliver it, and we'll get to the point where everybody, it's also important, you're interested in people who don't have much. If a person can get a little piece of fabric at the drugstore, put a drop of urine on it, let it dry, and put it in an ordinary envelope with a 50-cent stamp and send it in, and an automated machine looks at it for 2 minutes and tells him useful things about his health. That's, you might call it populist medicine. To deliver, because I already had a criteria. Starting in 1968, when we started this, I says, I don't want to work on any technique that couldn't be automated and delivered for $5, because the idea is to improve the health of everybody. There's a curve here you might be interested in. This is the death, the lifespan, the number of people alive as a function of time in the American population, and you see it kind of starts falling off early. You know, a lot of people that die early. They don't get a full life. If this were fruit flies in the laboratory, the curve would be square, and most of them die off in one period, because we know how to take care of fruit flies. And mice the same way. But for people, we don't do a very good job. The goal, I mean, everybody would like to make the lifespan 200 years, but that's not what we're talking about. The goal is to get enough information so that we can improve people's lives and stop these early deaths, so that everybody gets 90 or 100 years. And this goal can only be achieved if you have something you can deliver to everybody. If you could just deliver it at a high price, then people with a lot of money would get it, but it won't help. But to square this curve, we had to have something that was low cost. So now we have something that's very low cost that can gather health information of value before illness. And we're just continue to collect samples and continue to improve the analytical and mathematical methods until this is picked up and delivered.
So where do we go from here with that?
Well, we just keep doing research.
You keep doing the research, but now the certification, what about the certification process? And that's
well, what
to get
has
on
to
the
happen,
shelf.
unfortunately, the bureaucracy that has grown up around medical care in the country is just, is unprincipled. It's huge. And as a consequence, one of the consequences is that you cannot even apply something in medicine unless you have a permit from the government. You can't do it unless you have a permit to do it, and you can't use a technique unless they permitted it. And that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. So for this technique to be applied and delivered to the American people, the research will have to impress industrialists enough that they're willing to spend the capital required to get it permitted. Now, I'm a free enterprise advocate. I think you should just be able to deliver things to people that they want. But we have to do this research without giving information to the people in the sample bank, because that would be illegal. But eventually, and I think within a few years, industrialists will start to apply and deliver this. They may not do it for $5, but hopefully competition will drive the price down there eventually, because technologically it's capable of doing it.
Well, that was one of the other areas that I was impressed with the art, is because you're taking something to Congress that basically could be shared with everyone that would benefit the
this
public.
is just a specialty, but Congress has one scientist in it out of 435. I always thought a couple more wouldn't be a bad idea. The competition is a little different, China, I wouldn't want to live in China. I don't like their system of government. But about half of them are engineers and scientists that are running that country. I don't think scientists should run the country, but there is fundamental science that affects everything we do, affects our technology, and we should have more science and engineering in our legislative bodies than we do. So when we first ran, that was our objective.
Okay.
Since then, I've learned more about politics than I wanted to know.
You know that.
And I've learned that the processes required to get elected have little to do with whether you can do a good job when you get in office.
Yes. You know, that was another area that I was interested in your campaign, was the fact on the education piece. Education is huge here in this country. You know, from the standpoint is lacking to get into the little folks, if you will. And you had the experience. I'd like for you to share that again.
Well, I homeschooled my 6 children, and they all have advanced degrees now. And people. DeFazio says I don't like education, but that's the way. But the central issue is when you and I went to school, we got great education in the public schools. There was no homeschooling in the country, none. Now there's homeschooling because we're now about 20th in the world on standardized tests, and the educational quality's gone down, even though we're spending huge amounts of money. Education is one place where you can see something about the problem quantitatively, because the average expenditures on a student in K through 12 education is $12,000 per student across the country. In Portland it's 14, in Washington D.C. it's about 25. And so if you take that 12 multiplied by 30 students, you have $360,000. So on average, for a 30 student classroom for 9 months, the taxpayers pay $360,000. Well, that is not being paid to the teacher. That she's not getting all that money. The bureaucracy that has been built up, and most of these are well-meaning people, but the huge non-educational thing that has been built up around our education system not only is taking about 2/3 of the money, but it's also interfering with the educators. We have hundreds of thousands of outstanding teachers who have to put up with this thing that tells them what to do. And I believe that is a problem, because the American people are spending this money. In D.C., it's like $500,000 per classroom, and yet most of the students are graduating with almost no reading skills. And Congress controls D.C. So it's true of a lot of things. It's true of research. It's true of our medical system. We can see it quantitatively in education. We've built up what's called the administrative state politically. And it is important to have administrators because the government has to apply its actions and goals. But I think it's gotten out of hand, and we can see it especially in education, where 2/3 of the money, or even 3/4 in many districts, doesn't reach the student or the teacher. And so I wish we're homeschooled. We have a family business that supplies educational materials to 60,000 homeschoolers. I'd like to see homeschooling go away. I'd like to see the school quality go back to what we had before, 50 years ago, and then we could work from there.
They had really great schooling in Beaverton and Portland State.
I'm not telling you there aren't great schools.
Oh, wow.
But the average across the country is not.
No, this is 50 years ago.
Oh, 50 years ago. Yeah, well, I went to school in Houston, Texas. And those schools gave me my whole life.
Yeah.
The high school was great. That got me into Caltech. They gave me a good science education, and my whole life has been wonderful because of those schools.
Right.
And I'm not telling you they're not there anymore, but for the most part, they aren't there for most of the students. And it isn't the teacher's fault. It's the system that it's kind of where governments can go, you know. It's gone to the point where the resources are not going to the.
Well, you know, another term comes up with that, and that's the whole idea.
I can put it much more, much more rigorously.
Yeah.
But you've given me an example of how to. So I'm halfway there.
Yeah. See, another area that comes in that talks about this charter school thing kind of comes in the same vein.
No, that's an improvement, but
it's
not solving the problem.
And when you're thinking, when I'm thinking about specifically here in the Portland metropolitan area, and I'm thinking about Northeast Portland now, aspect of it, and you know, a lot of times they'll say, well, the charter schools, you know, what are we going to do about minority students or black students, if you will? Okay. And then all of a sudden we got in this other arena where we've got SEI, remember, with Tony Hobson, That's a charter school.
I like competition.
Yeah. No, it's good. No,
I like vouchers. Give every one of these kids $12,000.
Yeah.
He can't get the money. He gets
yeah,
a voucher, and he picked a school.
Yeah.
And the public schools would compete with one. They used to. When I was going to school, when you were going to school, people, when they moved to a city, asked about what the schools. They wanted to go to they wanted to live in the school district that was best. And that even affected property values.
Yeah.
If you would give the students, every student, those students in D.C., 15 or 20,000 a year is being spent on each student. If that student was carrying a voucher worth $15,000 or $20,000, he could find a school to give him a first-class education. And the public schools would get a lot better. They would compete with the others, and I think you'd have a much better situation than a situation where you go to school and do what we give you, and 2/3 of the money is going to go to the people who are running the schools, and I mean, to have a situation where in the nation's capital, 50,000 students, 2/3 of them black, graduate from high school, mostly not able to read, is a situation that has to change.
Yeah.
And the U.S. Congress is responsible for those schools. All the rest are state, but they're responsible. So I can get pretty tough about that.
That's what's bothering me. I see people graduating from high school or from 10th grade who go into a facility and they sit and watch television all day. And they don't read. I never see them read a newspaper or a book.
Read.
And they don't, I don't know if they don't know how to read or they just don't like to read.
They're not good at it, at least, until they don't like it.
I think that's part of it. But I read all day long. I've read every newspaper in this town, the Portland Observer and the Scanner. I read them all to find out what's going on around me. I'm interested in that.
But from the educational standpoint, and again, that's where I was going with reference to your voucher aspect of it.
Yeah.
The charter is kind of like a voucher system aspect of it, but it's still controlled by the same problem school.
Yeah.
How Portland Public Schools, for instance, control that piece. But I'm saying, in this particular case, the SEI was more predominantly just blacks, if you will. But it was identified as one that was achieving all sorts of blah 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 accolades of doing the good job, the top. So you ask yourself the question: why in the heck couldn't the public school do the job? They're the one that's supervising that piece.
Well, we know they did do the job. We've done the experiment because the American people had those schools.
Yes, right.
So that can be fixed.
Yes.
But and the other thing is, if you propose a solution, or you're running for office, and I'm complaining about this, I want to do something, you have to fix them now. You can't write off 50 million kids and say we'll fix them 10 years from now.
That's true.
But I think there are things you can do, and competition would be one of them.
Well, that's that whole idea of Mr. Smith goes to Washington, see? Yeah. I mean, that's the whole idea of getting someone to
But if
sit at the table.
you make trouble about this, now, of course, I complain about this. I've talked about this a lot.
Right.
Well, if you do that, your opponent in an election immediately says he wants to close the schools.
Yeah.
He doesn't like the schools. He's going to end education.
Well, that's
And
where term limits
that's
comes
the way
in,
it is
see?
played politically. But of course, that's not true.
I was thinking one thing. I was on the phone with Reverend Stephen Berger of the Union Gospel Mission.
Here local?
No, he started in Seattle and then he went to Kansas City. He runs them all until he retired. And he told me he'd had a conversation with his uncle, who was a guy named Warren Berger. Do you remember him? Remember Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?
Oh, yeah.
He said that people aren't taking responsibility for themselves. It's our responsibility to find out, to get an education. If we're not getting it, we're going to find some way to spur that on, or to find another school.
But you can't expect that from the youth, from the kids. They're trying to get educated. It's the grown-ups who basically control that mechanism. You see what I'm saying?
Taking responsibility.
Yeah, they got to be. Yeah, you got to. Yeah, who's gonna?
Somebody's got to do it, and we're not.
Yeah, we're not doing it.
We're just sitting here. My ex-wife was a school teacher, and she ended up out here at a place called Portland Community College a few years ago, and she was appalled by the people that she got to work with from there. My understanding was.
People too much think that the government will take care of them, and they don't take responsibility. And that's okay if the government does a good job. And in some, like in defense, the government has to defend our country. We're not out there with rifles, but when it isn't doing the right job, it needs to be changed, and it's hard to change because we have
Somebody's getting
processes.
Yeah, we're running out of minutes, Jasper. Let me throw some other things on it. I'm just real quickies. How about term limits? How do you feel about that piece? I mean, let's get him in. Let's get the Art in there, and then go on
Well,
real quick.
the voters certainly like term limits, and if there's no other way, or we could just say, since the three of us would apply, don't elect anybody under 70 for office, and you have to worry about term limits.
the guy off.
But actually, it's a very strong issue because if a man or woman goes to Washington or to Salem,
Yeah.
and he plans to be there a couple of terms and come home, then he may want to do a good job so his neighbors will like what he did. But once he decides it's a career, then he votes about what's good for him. And that changes. That changes everything.
Yeah.
That's true.
Are we going to get out of that mess?
Yeah.
You think? What do you think? What are we going to do for this crop that we have now? I mean, it is changing down in
In Salem? Is it in Salem?
Yeah.
Well, I think probably we ought to have some form of term limits, but I don't know what it'd be right now. People are being there too long. When you figure 36 years down there for a bureaucrat, I mean, a school teacher, administrator, I mean, really education is fine and intelligence is fine, but after you're there 36 years, that's long enough.
That's long time.
Yeah, you know.
That's long time.
I would never want to serve 36 years.
I think about 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. 4 years, but like it's
Because then the guy is a citizen, a legislator. He goes there, he goes back. He has to live under the laws he made. His neighbors, he wants them to be happy with him. But once he's entrenched, it's a whole different world.
They get a wonderful son of life back there.
Yeah.
It's hundreds of thousands of bucks and limousines.
Yeah. That's why you can criticize.
Yeah.
I want to criticize my opponent.
Sure.
And he's been voting against changing the schools in Washington. Now, that you can say, well, gee, this is terrible.
Yeah.
But, you know, he wants to be reelected. And the unions are powerful, and the unions don't want the schools changed. So he votes for the unions. And that's not just him. That's the way these career politicians act. Because it's human nature. He wants to stay in his position, so he doesn't want to offend the people that keep him in the position. So he votes and not always recognizes that the vote should be the other way.
Boy, yeah. It's a catch-22 back there once you get in office. I've heard people swear up and down that they're going to serve 2 terms and out.
Oh, yeah.
The 3rd term comes along and they forgot all that.
Well, you know,
they said.
Ron Paul, who's active in our... Ron Paul wrote an article recently which he said, we can't fix Washington by electing better people to Congress. Because he says when they get there, they're told, you better go along for 10 years. And so they say to themselves, well, okay, I'll join for 10 years and then I'll do good things. And at the end of 10 years, they're just like all the rest.
So are they talking? Were they talking about their particular issues? I mean, they didn't have the opportunity to put their issues on the table.
Once they got there, they change. And it's not just in Washington. We have it down in Southern California, Southern Oregon. The commissioners.
Yeah.
We keep electing commissioners and they change.
Yeah.
The commissioner, the guy running for office, will have all the right things to say. There's one fellow down there in one of the counties, I don't need to get personal, but 2 commissioners died. So he got to appoint the other 2. And then they turned against him. I said, well, what happened? He says, I don't know. They weren't that way before I got them. Once they get in this position and they're dispensing some money and they're kind of important, human nature is not on our side.
One thing that they don't do that I think they should consider, and that is that when you're filing to run for office, you should specifically identify the issues you're bringing to the table. Because too often, you need to know, one, what are you running for? You know, what office you're running for, and have some idea what the problems are. You got me? And then when you respond to the filing, is quote, this is where I think I can solve the problem. These some they don't have nothing. You can't go to any of these entities that are already there to share with you what the problems are.
But you know what the situation is? I've been trying to get DeFazio to discuss the issues for four elections.
Well, that's the issue.
He won't do it. And because that's not in his best interest.
He doesn't have to.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
It's not in his interest to do it.
How do we change that, Jim?
The last thing I was thinking about is the city council, and I'm very familiar with them. I ran for the office 13 years ago, and instead of telling your stories as you have to tell,
Yeah.
that's not anything else. It's stories. You have your aides do it. Your mouthpiece. For the mayor, and I know him and I like him, and yet he's having to tell stories for the mayor, and his other aides are trying to tell stories too, and I don't like to see him have to be put in that position because it's hard on them. It's hard on young kids to be told.
Yeah.
You have to go out there and tell them this, and they don't necessarily want to, but they have to keep their job.
Well, the reason why they have to tell the story is because the person who's running don't have the issues.
To quote a man, to quote a black man, Booker T. Washington, who was one of the greatest educators in American history, started Tuskegee University after the Civil War. I've been reading some of his books. Booker T. Washington told those students at Tuskegee that education had only one purpose, to learn how to discern the truth. He said that was what we're there for. You might learn a skill and something, but he just emphasized, and these black kids off of plantations, you know, they were helping him build it. They built their own buildings, but he emphasized the reason you're here is to learn how to discern the truth. That's what your education is for, and that fits pretty well in science. It's gotten to be hasn't fitted as well as it should in politics.
I took biochemistry, so I know.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been a very interesting time, and it's been an interesting year. That's why I had you guys on, both of you. And Art, you're going to be running. You're running for Congress there, and we're going to have you on next year for sure. And Jim, you're going to hopefully come back and spend a little bit more time with us, right?
Yeah,
Fair? Okay. Because I think it's going to be very, very important, to do something along that particular line,
You might know something before Christmas.
Yes. Yes. You think so?
Yeah, you might know something before Christmas.
Well, good. That sounds
I don't
good.
know. It depends on a lot of things.
All right. Well, guys, I want to thank you very much for being here with us. Again, Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays to everybody, and you guys, okay? And see you next year.
Great.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a real pleasure to meet you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Have a good one. Hey folks, thanks for watching. But now I need to ask you a favor. Tell me what you think of the show. Because this show is for you, the viewers. I'm just here to help bring the discussion to the table, if you will. Is there a topic you want to hear more about? Get on that social media and send me a message. On YouTube, write a comment below the video. Give me a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you didn't. And click subscribe and stay in touch with future discussions. You can also post a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com//Oregon Voter Digest. I love you folks, and I'll see you next week. Take care.